Okay. Oh man, that's right behind me. All right, we ready to get started? Woo woo! All right, well, thank all you guys for coming out to Jamstack Denver. Oh man, I can't even hear myself think. But tonight's an exciting night. We're going to be doing a jobs panel. As you can see, we've got a bunch of experts here. But before we get into that, let's talk about the Jamstack. Why, hopefully all of you are here, not for jobs. But yeah, I just wanted to go over the Jamstack real quick, tell you guys what it is, since we're at Jamstack Denver. So a stack is just a set of technologies to kind of run a website, front end to back end, all the tech you need. So Jamstack stands for JavaScript, APIs, and markup. So it's more of an abstract stack than, say, the mean stack or Maven or other stacks, because JavaScript can entail the Angular framework, React, Vue, or just vanilla JavaScript. You access all your backend logic through APIs, which makes it more secure. And then all markup, the M, is served statically from CDN, hosted on a repository, a Git repository. And that makes it performant, quick, and cheaper to scale. So that's the benefits of the Jamstack, and I'm glad you guys all love the Jamstack. Woo! What are some admin items? We have a code of conduct. It's basically be respectful. You can find it on our meetup page. And yeah, let's see. Okay, so why don't we just kick off this jobs panel? Let's see, before we start, kind of the goals of this panel were to, let's see, I've got notes on my phone, don't worry. I guess we sort of had three goals in mind when we made this, the plan for this meetup, and that was to discuss how to get your first job in software development or related careers, or to discuss how to keep learning and advance your career as a developer if you're not a junior developer or further on, and then to discuss all things that recruiters and hiring managers are looking for in software developer related careers. So with that frame of reference, let's kick it off here. And just so you know, I wanted this to have a lot of audience participation. So halfway through, I plan on this ending at around 7:15, 7:20. I was hoping to open up questions to the audience to get a wider perspective of what really people want to know about how to get a job in software development or job on the Jamstack. So please hold on to your questions until halfway through, and then we'll open it up to everyone and pass the mic around. So yeah, let's introduce our panelists of a variety of experiences and backgrounds. And we'll start here with Brett.
My name is Brett Smith. Is that better? There we go. Should be good. I'm a principal here at CoTalent. We're a technical recruiting agency. We work mainly with venture capital and private equity-backed tech startups and modern technology companies. A little bit of enterprise. I've been doing this for 4.5 years. Prior to that, I was a civil engineer and failed tech startup founder.
Hi, my name is Kristin Dubenko. I am a senior product manager at GitLab just for the last 5 months. I'm about 15 years into my career right now, and I started my early 20s as a full stack dev and then moved into UX at Apple in California for about 3 years. And then I moved out here and worked at a startup called Printfection, which is here in Denver, and now I'm at GitLab. So I've kind of gone from engineer to UX to product. I'm a little out of the game in terms of code, in terms of some of the more technical questions just in the last 3 to 4 years, but I think I can give some insight on what I look for team members.
My name is Jonah Walker. I'm a senior software developer. I've been in the industry for about 8 years. Started out in front-end web development, then went to full stack doing middle tier and back-end using C#. And recently, in the last year, transitioned to being a mobile developer using Google's latest framework, Flutter, which is a React Native competitor. So I'm currently a developer in the coffee industry now, Blue Bottle Coffee as of this week, and am working on mobile apps.
I'm Brianna DelValle. I just graduated from Turing School of Software and Design in November. I am a junior dev at Frontier Airlines. I studied front end, but I'm working in C#, which is actually pretty sweet. And before I became a developer, I was a middle school math teacher for 7 years.
Nice, right on. So those are our panelists. Let's get started with questions. So first one's for Brianna. How has your coding bootcamp Turing prepared you for the job hunt?
I guess I'll go off of my boss's feedback, where he's been very impressed with like how quickly I was able to jump into the code base, and it's not in JavaScript, which was, I worked mostly in React in Turing, but we had the background in, agile methodologies. We had the background in testing. We just had a strong background in JavaScript in general, which allowed me to jump in pretty quickly. So I feel pretty prepared, and I'm telling my friends that are still looking for jobs, like, you are prepared. Like, I know that Turing did a really good job preparing us, and everybody needs to feel confident going into the job hunt.
And yeah, I've heard that you should apply to jobs before you feel you're 100% qualified for them. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not applying to jobs because you don't meet every criteria on the job description, you're doing yourself an enormous disservice. If I had to hit that metric every time, I wouldn't make a cent all year. I mean, maybe one candidate out of 50 every year. And people pay us to find them exactly what they want. So don't let not having everything on that job description deter you from applying. That's pretty important.
I would just second that and say I probably only had 60% on every job I got up until product, so just go for it. Yeah.
All right, cool. So Brett, what are some advantages of using a recruiter that people might not be aware of?
Sure. So how many of you guys are looking for your first tech job? Like 60-40? So I will say this. If you're looking for your first tech job, in my experience, you're typically not going to be working with a third-party recruiter. That's because people pay us to go find folks that already have a job, typically that aren't looking or don't even know that they're looking yet. So I wanted to get that out of the way up front. Now, that being said, if you're already in a job and you're looking for a new job, recruiters have a lot of advantages. So if you're working with a good recruiter, they're going to have a relationship with that client, right? So we get paid largely on commission. So if we're pursuing you because we think that you can get that job. There's a couple other advantages as well. So we're going to be able to give you tips, tricks, pointers, and a big one is feedback too. So a lot of times if you throw your resume down the black hole, you're never going to get a response. Maybe you get an automated response. Hey, I have no idea what happened. I don't know why I didn't get that job. If you're working with a good recruiter, they're going to give you that feedback. Hey, here's why you didn't get that job. Your technical skills were a little under par. Here's what you missed, or the way that you described how you left that last job put a bad taste in some people's mouths. That's a good one as well. And we're also going to be able to give you some coaching tips on interviews because we have candidates in that process. So essentially, we've almost been through that interview process before. So we're going to be able to help guide you through that. We're also going to get to know you. So we're going to be able to help guide you and say, okay, these are the major things that you want. This company doesn't have that. This company does. Let's go for that, right? Because we don't want to waste, A, our client's time, B, your time, and C, our time. So there is a lot of advantages to working with a good recruiter. I guess.
Nice. Jonah, do you have experience with recruiters? Could you dive into that?
Yeah, so I've had experience with recruiters on both sides of it, from the employer perspective as well as the employment perspective. I usually don't try to apply to any jobs on my own now. I only use recruiters. And the reason for that is that I'm good at what I do, which is programming. I'm not necessarily good at like doing resumes and trying to figure out how to best describe like what I do on a daily basis, right? So working with a recruiter who has in mind the job that they're already trying to fill and has already like done the research to find my LinkedIn profile and all of that kind of stuff, which is basically SEO for myself, then that allows me to get into a company a lot faster than if I were to just be searching on my own. And my own personal experience was that I applied directly to a position. I got like reached out to 2 days later from a recruiter, and literally like 6 hours later I was on the phone with the person at the company. So recruitment can be a really fast way of getting at least a job interview, whether that's phone or in person. Now from a employer perspective, I used to work at Frontier Airlines, and we actually hired Gabe here, a junior developer, I might add, through a recruiter. So it might not be always that, you know, you won't be able to use a recruiter if you're a junior. It just depends on what the recruiter's looking for at the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Go Frontier. Low fare is done right. Yeah, and I've gotten 2 jobs via recruiters, so I recommend looking into those if you haven't already done that. But cool. Kristin, so working at a large, well-respected tech company, how would you recommend a junior developer align themselves to get a career at a place like GitLab?
Yeah, so at GitLab right now, we're growing. We've grown a lot, and we are not downsizing, but we just put a pause on hiring in a big way. So the juniors are less likely to get through right now. However, that's probably just short term, like 6 months-ish. And I would say if you're going into any big company, you can also just end up going into the black hole. So networking is really important, coming out to events like this, meeting people, even on LinkedIn, trying to offer some value to them, not just stalking them, but like trying to maybe comment on their Medium post and like give them some really good feedback, get connections in the company that you're interested in, as well as applying. Also, one thing that I look for always is work product. So the resume is one thing, but having links out to something you've actually done, especially if you're a junior and you can show your work, you can show that you thought through a problem, or you iterated on something, or you failed, or you made a mistake. Like getting that stuff in your resume is really important to show that you've kind of gone beyond, I guess, being a junior and like really thought through some bigger stuff, even if you don't have the actual job title yet.
Nice,
Yeah.
very nice. Any other comments? Okay, Jonah, my previous boss. You've changed jobs and worked in multiple disciplines of software development. What are, in your opinion, good reasons for leaving your current job for the next opportunity?
Yeah, so if you look at my resume, you'll probably see that like my average stint at a company is about 10 months. And the reason for that is that I'm an eternal learner. And so for me, after about 10 months, it seems that the exponential growth that I was getting when I first got to the company and all of the problems that they had were more or less solved at that point, and the team was in a really good spot to where I could move on and find a new industry, find something that I wasn't familiar with, and that just allowed me to kind of learn at a much faster rate than someone who's been in their job for a long time. So for me, I think whether you're like trying to find the position that you're getting to as a first-time developer, or if you're going to a new job, one of the main reasons for me to make that move is to make sure that you're going somewhere where you're going to learn a lot more than you currently are now. So that's always helped me in the past, and just like going into a job, I think it depends on where you're at in your career. If you are a junior developer, in my opinion, the best thing you can do is get experience. You might not love the position at first, but once you're able to get into that first position, you're able to say like, hey, I've got 6 months experience, then recruiters are going to start looking at you. And then you're going to be able to have that kind of experience under your belt to where when they ask you questions and say, tell me about a time when, because they always ask that, even if we don't like it, right? Tell me about a time when, you're going to actually have something to back that up with. So when you're first starting, try to make sure you get some experience, move on from there to something that maybe is a little more exciting. But no matter where you go, when you're a junior developer, you're going to be learning absolutely everything. So just take it in and just try to be a sponge for the first 6 months or so.
Yeah, I agree. Learning is everything at a job. And then when it gets stale and you're not learning anything, that's an opportunity to leave. I've lived by that rule a little bit. Let's see. Brianna, what are some things you might recommend to study and learn before beginning the job search for your first job in software development?
Well, I searched for only a few months, so I was pretty lucky. But I did make it a point to start writing like Medium articles about accessibility because that was something that I was passionate about. So just start doing my own research. I also knew that I was applying to Frontier, so I knew that they worked in Vue. So I picked up Vue and I started making kind of my own side project of just trying to rebuild an app that I use every day just to get practice on that. I think networking was the biggest thing. So going to every event possible. Frontier actually came in to Turing and did portfolio reviews, and that's like how I ended up getting connected with Frontier. They weren't even hiring at the time, but that really led me to the job and just like having more connections. That's most of what I've done. Yeah, just like finding my own passion projects and doing research in the company and working kind of in between those two.
Nice, very nice.
So I think one of the things you said that is really good is you identified, hey, this company needs Vue. I better learn some Vue. And you know, when people come out of Turing, you've got this wide breadth of skill in, you know, typically JavaScript, right? The more, what's that? For front end. Right. The more that you can specialize yourself, even at that early stage, and that doesn't have to be the rest of your career, that's going to make it easier for somebody to pull the trigger because they can see, hey, I can plug this person in. You can write code for Vue day one. And so the more that you tailor your resume, tailor your experience, keep doing those projects, right? Don't stop coding just because you're looking for a job. The more that you can tailor yourself and say, hey, I can fit this hole. I can come in day one and contribute, the easier it's going to be for somebody to hire you as a junior.
Yeah, very cool. Britt, pick up that mic. So I wanted to know, what do other companies tell you when they want to use Code Talent as their recruiter?
Sure. So, you know, we're lucky in that we have a fairly good reputation. So we do get a lot of inbound requests. And typically it's, they're in need of something that, you know, is either A, hurting production, B, somebody left, C, we're growing. You know, it's just, hey, we need this talent, we need it now, and we're not seeing it from the resume portal. We put out a LinkedIn job posting, we're not getting good applicants, and we need headhunters, people to go call, people to send those LinkedIn messages, and people to identify those candidates that haven't been applying, that are good fits for the company, that are interested, you know, in that position.
All right. Kristin. So, as a product manager with experience in design and UX, what advice do you have for people trying to get into their first UX design job, not necessarily developer job?
I would say the same thing goes, like having a really good portfolio, which is kind of obvious if you're in the design side of things. Same thing though, if you're a front-end engineer or you want to specialize in that, or you have skills in building out design systems, showing how you modified Twitter Bootstrap, showing thought around like choices around design systems, I think is really big. Also, like if you're going for a UX position these days, quite often you need to know those things as well, how to edit SAS, all of those goodies around design systems. So I think that's one of the things that can set you above. Similarly, your portfolio, which I already mentioned. And then if you're thinking around product as well, so like showing what you design, but being able to say obviously how this could benefit the user in some way, and potentially if you're going for a bigger company could contribute to revenue or a feature, or maybe just like thinking on the bigger scale of like what you're designing, and then thinking the why, like why would we put this out here, or why, if I was going to go sell this thing that I just designed, what would the value add be? So I'm always looking for people who talk about their experience, but also relate it back to being on a product team where you've got other engineers, you've got a designer, you've got a PM, and at the end of the day, we have to sell something to a customer. So just keeping that in mind when you're doing any kind of interview.
Piggyback on that, I want to say, like, as a junior developer, I didn't feel like anything that I did was good enough to put out there for like people to look at, because like one of the things that you'll notice that we'll say is like, make sure you have this and it's good. Well, good is very relative to how much experience you have. So as a hiring manager, I knew I was looking at a junior developer, and what I would do is I would look to see what their base was, so that I knew as a manager what resources that we would want to use in order to like get them up to speed, so that they'd be able to start contributing to the company. It for both of us, right? Because like all of us want to feel that we're contributing to something in a way that's good. So for me, it wasn't about having something that was perfect. It was about having something that I could look at and know who to put them with on my team, so that they would be able to learn what they needed to learn, so that they'd start be able to like contribute at a rate that they wanted to. So don't feel like your stuff isn't good enough. Put it out there and always just show that you're continually improving on it, and I think that's enough.
Third, that iteration, and then also if you've got a friend who is a UX designer and maybe you're going for like a front-end position, you can team up with them and get them to look at your work, get them to level it up so it looks really awesome, and mention you worked with a designer on this too, because you're going to be doing that on a team. And it's like some of my really early like HTML projects, I had a designer friend who was helping me with that, and I did get the job, and I was saying I was working with someone else as well. So it doesn't have to be all you. It won't be all you when you're on a team. So, but obviously don't pass it off as your own, like 100% your own. But I think that shows that you know what's coming in terms of the job, and you know how to utilize talent around you.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you guys said. Leverage open source and the people you know, and always be trying to practice your craft and have tangible items you can show your companies. Jonah, so one of my goals in the next 3 years or so is to become a senior software developer. So what in your eyes is a good, I guess, roadmap to improve my technical and personal skills to become a senior developer?
Yeah, so the path to a senior developer, in my opinion, involves thinking about someone other than yourself. And so what that starts to mean is that when you're writing code, you're not just writing it in order to figure out how to make it work, right? As you get good as being a developer, you'll realize that any developer can make something work. It's a matter of how maintainable that you're making it, how easy it is for other people to understand the code that you're writing, and also like knowing that what you're writing is going to be able to be like extended by other people as well. So, and that's just going to come with time. Half of that stuff probably doesn't mean anything to you all at the moment, and that's totally okay. So like really what it starts to mean is as you progress from being an individual contributor to working more with your team is that you take and say, okay, yes, I'm writing this code. Yes, it works, but how can I make it better? And that how can I make it better is going to improve your skill. But not only that, when you do a code review to someone else, you're going to be able to say, oh, I just learned with my own experience that this is a really good way to do it, and it helped me because of this. So being able to teach someone else and improve your own code and just like always try to find a better way of doing it rather than just saying, oh, you know what, I remember I did that 6 months ago, let me go copy paste that code. Like just try to do it again from scratch. If you want to look back, fine. But if you find a better way to do it, maybe you want to replace the code you did 6 months ago with the new code you just wrote.
I like it. Always learning, trying to improve what you've done, and taking note of the lessons. Okay, so I guess at this point, I'd like to open up questions to the audience. Thomas will be walking around with a mic. Does anyone have a question? Because I could go all day. I've got more.
How's it going? Ooh, nice.
What's up, Thomas?
Questions? Who has questions?
So if you're applying for a job where you say you only tick 60% of the boxes or something, how do you change your resume to kind of, I mean, how do you hit those points? I mean, because if you're only hitting 50% of their requirements, why would they call you?
Right. I think it's harder when you're right at the very, very beginning to do that. So you would have to work harder and like get your portfolio up to speed. But I would say a lot of the positions I've gone for, I'm going in there, and usually it's a year requirement that you're falling behind on. If you obviously don't know anything about the posting, like don't do it. But if you can get over that line around 60% or you're within the zone in terms of the number of years, I would say go for it.
Piggyback on that. So for me, when I got my like first couple of jobs, it was mostly through networking. Just there's so many people that are applying to jobs right now, and your resumes, especially if you're coming from like the same boot camp where you all have the same projects, it's going to be really hard to set yourself apart. So in my opinion, I would just say go out and like do what she mentioned earlier, which was I thought was amazing advice. Comment on someone's like Medium articles, find what they're doing in the community, and then help them become better at what they're doing. And that's going to get you on their radar. And having an in at a company is always going to be better than just like throwing your resume and hoping that someone reads it.
I can give you one more that I use. So when you're writing a cover letter, a lot of people get stuck in the formality of it. Nobody really cares about that anymore. So one of the things I like to tell people is if you really like this job and you have the ability to also submit a cover letter, copy and paste the bullet points from what they're looking for, do sub-bullet points under each of those bullet points as to why you can do that job. That's a technique that I've seen work a lot. Sometimes we use it with our own candidates. We say, hey, you know, I'm like, help me out here. I want to make a strong introduction. I'm going to give you these couple bullet points. I want you to speak to these. Completely informal, but all meat, right? So all absolute things that a recruiter on the other side of the company is going to want to see, or that hiring manager is going to want to see. Hey, they've really put some thought into this. Maybe some of the areas that they haven't touched, they're doing some self-study on. That's another technique that can be pretty helpful if you're able to do a cover letter, not just tailoring your resume.
Quick question about portfolios. What are some red flags that you all have seen in portfolios, and how, you know, maybe some strategies on mitigating those?
And like for a UX position or?
For software development.
So looking at a code sample or an actual like finished, you're looking an app. So for me, it's high level. It's just looking at the aesthetics of it as the first thing. it's like a gut check of a yes or a no. Did they get it? Did they not? Does it look awkward? So I have kind of like an internal gut check on the look of it, and then it's more around the functionality is the next thing that I go to, although they should probably be together. So if it's like a color picker or like a widget or something like that, I would be trying it, making sure that it worked, looking at how you thought through the UI, and just making sure it looks good and you can use it. That's my high level for that.
So from a dev perspective, I wouldn't even open the app. I would literally just look at the code. And one of the things that I look at is just the red flag would be like a fundamental misunderstanding of how the language works. So that's like clearly, if you don't understand it when you wrote it, you're not going to be able to fix that by looking at your own code. So don't submit it unless you get someone else that's more experienced than you to code review your own code. That will hands down solve a lot of the red flags that you're worried about when you go to submit something. Even if it's just like a coding challenge that jobs give you a lot of times, have someone else look at it before you submit it, because there's probably going to be something that they're going to catch, even if it's just a spelling mistake in a comment, right? Like that's not going to throw you over the edge, but at least it's caught before you send it in.
There's a question for you, actually. So we get this a lot. I don't know what it means in practice, right? I'm not a developer, but is it tested, right? Has it been tested? That's one that I get a lot, and I get people that get, thrown out of the process. They get rejected because that code's not tested. Is that something you look for?
I think it really depends. So testing's really nice to have. I've never really been one to check for testing. Here's the reason why that happens, though. So if you submit your code and say that this is like production code and some other developer is going in there to create a new feature or to fix some kind of bug that has come up in the system, if they don't have tests, they don't know whether the code that they wrote is breaking everything and just like adding the one new feature, or if it's not, right? So having tests in there to be able to just run it, usually you don't have to have 100% code coverage or anything like that. That's basically a myth. Like you pretty much can't have 100% code coverage. One, because it usually takes too much time to do that, and two, you only really need to like test the core features of your app. So especially the ones that make you or your company money. But like if you don't have those tests in place, then they have no idea what the intent of your app is. Usually as a developer, the first thing you can do is go into the tests of an application and figure out like why and what is important to that company.
I sort of have a two-part question. So the first one is, what personal strength did you use to sort of navigate the industry, all of you in your personal fields, because it's software industry that you're all working in right now? And the second part of the question is, who are some people that you admire in the field and why you admire them?
There's a few people that I admire in the field as of like, a year ago was Flutter, right? So there are a few content creators that I follow on YouTube, and that's Riso Coder, Field Stacks, and then there's also someone who does a lot of JavaScript stuff. I believe he came from Google, but his name is Jeff Delaney. He runs Fireship.io, and like all of their videos are amazing. So what I really look up to them for is the ability to create really good content that's engaging. And not only that, but they know their stuff. So if I'm learning from them, I know that what I'm going to produce is going to be better than what I have today. Because if they're able to not only put it into practice and create good content, then like that's something for me to aspire to.
I'm not super deep into the industry to like have a huge like hero yet, but on Twitter there's this woman named Paris Athena, and she just kind of took ownership over the conversation around the pipeline problem of getting people of color into the tech industry, and she now has like a little company around it called Black Tech Twitter. So I just like to follow her and the people that she's engaged with so I can keep kind of like a pulse on diversity and inclusion in the tech industry, and that's like super important to me. So
Personal strength, did you say that?
I don't know that I've gotten the ability to exercise my personal strengths that I really bring from my career as a teacher. But I think like maintaining mental health is a big thing that I'm super into, making sure that you're taking breaks and taking care of yourself. And also, I can write really clear directions. So maybe one day that'll translate into like documentation. Like if I can get a 12-year-old that doesn't speak English as a first language to long divide, I think I can handle like some tech documentation here and there. So we'll see.
I would say for me, for personal strength, it would probably be ability to adapt and tenacity. And like this new job at GitLab, the first time in my career I've had another woman on a team with me my whole 15 years. So getting used to, from day one, being the only female in a class of 100 engineers and just kind of pushing through and kind of getting used to that, being the only one. I explain it. And always sort of pushing forward for the next hurdle. So for me, I just was always, I'm still tracking towards wanting to be in leadership down the road. I would say from an industry standpoint, no one's coming to mind right now around product, but like Sheryl Sandberg and other people who are women who have sort of held on through to the end. For me, that's sort of my North Star and what I'm aspiring to, and sort of when I'm often alone in terms of being the only woman, that's something that I look to sort of give me the gumption to keep going and feel inspired.
Yeah, I'd say it's just hard work. It's a couple things. It's hard work and getting lucky, and that results from working hard and not being afraid to take those opportunities when they come and not saying, hey, I don't think I'm good enough for that, go for it. You're as good as anybody else. But hard work has been a big part of my success. I also think that taking care of yourself comes first and foremost. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. If you're getting exercise, or eating stuff other than fried foods, or eating vegetables, that makes a difference for me personally. I'm sharper when I take care of myself, and it kind of extends into all areas of your life.
Nice, yeah. Stay away from gluten, things like that. White Claws.
I was wondering, as somebody starting to get into the junior role, or hoping to, what were some behaviors or some habits you might have seen that sort of made or break junior dev in terms of like good habits that you see to lead to success and ones that lead to maybe less optimal results?
I've worked with some interns as well as juniors, and I would say the ones that are the most successful really participate in the conversations in a big way. And like, I'm not talking about just the technical side of things, but they're engaging, asking good questions, asking more about the other roles on the team while they're learning. I think that means that when we have conversations later about whether to convert someone to full-time or bring them on, if they've been present and really talking to you, it goes a long way. And you'd be surprised, this is something I learned really early in my career. If you're in a room with anyone, if you're with execs, anybody else, half close your laptop and just look in people's eyes, because there's so many engineers that will just stare at their screen in any environment. And I would say I've had a lot of connections, and just by being the only one in the room that's staring up at the director and like nodding to what they're saying. So even if you're an intern or a junior, like make sure that you're talking to people who are 2 levels above you. If you have the chance, you're like networking on the job and really connecting with people too.
So I'm guessing since you're starting to get into the industry, you're going through the interview stage right now, right? So for me, during interviews, a lot of times you're able to tell whether this person just like is just trying to get the job or whether they're actually figuring out kind of a two-way street of whether they want to work there as well as like the company wants them to work there, right? So the questions that you ask is a lot of times just as important as how you act and how well you do on the code review or code whiteboarding and that kind of stuff. And like some of those questions can be along the lines of like, what would I be doing in my first day, first week, first month, like that kind of thing, because it really should be both ways. Yes, you want experience, as I mentioned earlier, but you also don't want to be miserable for 6 months either. So ideally, you would hopefully get multiple places that you're interviewing with. Now, whether you get multiple offers, that's a different story. But as you go through, really think about like questions that you want to ask them so that you're not just like asking a question and then immediately like not even paying attention to them and trying to figure out what question you're going to answer next or like ask next. So only ask them questions that you actually want to know about, because that'll actually make it engaging. Like in a conversation between two people, you don't just, well, you shouldn't ask questions that you don't care about the answer, right? Like ask a question and actually engage with them and make eye contact, like she was saying, not like stare a hole through them, but try to be a normal human for at least an hour. That's all they're going to know until they hire you, right? They're trying to figure out whether they want to actually work with you on a day-to-day basis. So don't be weird. Don't say things that you're like not going to say in your normal life. Just act like you normally do. And if they don't like you for who you are, then you don't want to work there anyway. So just be you. Don't do like all the weird stuff of like, oh, I need to cross my arms and do this at a certain point in time. Just be you. Be relaxed. Like, if they don't like you, they don't like you. It's fine. It's not meant to be.
I've only been in my position for less than 3 months now, but I think that I've been able to kind of stand out a little bit just by being really solutions oriented. So when I hear people on my team complaining about something, I can propose a solution, and it could be something really tiny, but just like feeling like I'm invested in the future of the team and like making that known to everyone else. Like I'm here to contribute to the culture and not just like soak everything in, but like also participate, I think is helping at least my manager see like he can lead me into things that I'm talented in, which like might be problem solving or leadership or something like that. So just like action oriented.
Well, obviously, I'm not a developer, so I'd just say but we do hire junior people, and I think one of the things that I've found most people respect is when you take initiative, right? So yes, you're going to ask a lot of questions, and you should ask a lot of questions, but when there's opportunity for you to take initiative, learn something on your own, find the resources to do something, take those. I'm not saying do that all the time and work in a silo. That would be a mistake. But if you can show initiative, I think that can get you ahead.
Cool, thanks. Sort of piggybacking off of some of those conversations around questions to ask in interviews, I'm curious, as a junior, what are some good questions that you can ask to gauge how the environment is going to be for a junior developer in terms of like how much support or mentorship or guidance, like are they well set up to take on juniors without it seeming like, oh, I need a ton of help, or, like I'm curious, like how do you gauge that it's a good environment that you're going to be going into and has the right supports and structure and scaffolding built in?
I think I knew that I was going to have the right supports because the people hiring me knew what my program entailed. So if you're not sure that they know like what background you have, say like, what do you expect a junior to have? Like, or if you're in a coding boot camp, like what do you expect or what do you believe graduates from this program are able to do, just to make sure that they know what they're getting. I also just asked like, what's the hardest problem you guys are solving? and what are you doing about it? And I thought that just shows a bunch of different layers of like how they problem solve and how the team works together and like how every person on the team is involved.
Quickly, you can go right after, but I would just add to that, if you flip the question around and you're asking like, what can I do for you? How can I make it better for you to the hiring manager as well? So then you're putting the focus on your value. You do want to get those questions answered around support and how you're going to grow, but if somebody is really amped up to contribute and that comes through, that's a really nice way to play it.
I think just asking, how does your team do code reviews, and how often does any of your team members currently participate in pair programming is a really great way to know how well connected your team is going to be, and you're able to see like, okay, well, if their code review process is like just kind of fire and forget, you send in a PR and no one talks to you about it and you get it back, like that's going to be pretty disparate in your kind of feedback loop there. So if you're able to have more one-on-one time earlier on in your career, I think you're going to be able to get practice of talking through the code and why you did it that way, and then also learning from someone who's more experienced. When it comes to code reviewing, whether your company practices this way or not, I would always suggest getting a code review from someone who you believe is more experienced in the area that this code is actually like pertaining to. So if it's in UX and UI, get someone who's like really great at that, like the best person on your team or even another team to help you code review and figure out how you can get better at it. So that kind of just asking how you would interact with your teammates would allow you to know how much support you're going to get, because I say most of the time you're probably not going to interact with your manager very much. It's going to be your team that you're talking to, and knowing how you all communicate would be how to know that.
That also just makes me think of a question I wish I asked, which was, what does a PR process look like, or what does a code review look like if I'm doing things correctly? Like, am I going to get any positive feedback about that? Are you going to tell me what you liked about it, or are you just going to say accept and move on? Like, I think that's a good way to gauge their process too.
I have a question. What is your favorite question, techie question, to ask juniors during interview process?
So I don't have a canned question. What I normally do is I look at their resume to figure out what their experience is in, because I've worked in multiple languages and like a lot of them have parallels. So even if I don't know the language, I know that that language is similar to this other language, so I can probably ask them this, right? If it's like in JavaScript, I usually ask them if they know the difference between like ES5 and ES6. And if they say yes, I ask them, great, like, can you tell me some of those? And a lot of times, like, just don't fall into the trap of saying things that you only kind of know, because my job as an interviewer is to figure out how many questions I can ask you until you no longer can answer it, right? Because that, again, lets me know where you need help in order to get you to the next stage of your like developer life cycle, right? Which is going from a junior to a mid to a senior to a principal, or going the other direction into management at that point. So like if you get asked a question and you don't have an answer to it, that's okay. That's kind of the goal. Like hiring managers are looking to see what you don't know so that they can help you get to the next place. But I usually ask very specific questions in relation to that. If it's along the lines of like, still JavaScript again, ES6, what is the scoping differences between a var, a let, a const? Can you add, like, can you actually change a value of an object if you assign it to a constant, right? Like, these are all things that allow me to know how in-depth you understand the language. But for the most part, like, I kind of, like I said, don't have a canned one. I just look at your resume, figure out what languages you know, and see where you are. I normally ask you, out of everything that you know, what do you feel is your absolute top level, like language or framework or whatever it is that you work in, and then I'll ask you questions about that.
As a person trying to transition into a tech career from a full-time career outside the tech industry, what are some ways that I can present my current skills to people so that they would respect or even like read into that I could be a great developer from my current experience?
So, what is your past experience? I'm going to put you on the spot right now. So, what is your past experience?
I'm a teacher.
Okay. A teacher in what?
I teach
area?
computer science and I do some development on the side as well. So I feel like my portfolio is strong, but
Okay.
just putting it out there that I like not having the tech experience, just not getting the feedback maybe.
You're like, no, I know everything about it. I just, okay. Well, yours is going to be pretty easy. I think that, like, in a lot of cases, you come from a background where you're like, well, I was a construction worker, which is really far from working on computers all day, right? So, yeah, I mean, with yours, you already understand the concepts, right? Which most of computer science and just doing our job is basically understanding how to get from point A to point B. And it doesn't even have to be in the most straight way. As everyone knows, you can write things like 1,000 different ways and it still works. But, like, I think you should be able to say, I haven't necessarily put it in practice, but I know the concepts and I understand how this works. And so you coming into a job as a junior developer, you've already got the experience of not only knowing the technologies and things, but you know how to teach other people what you already know. So going into a job, like, your teaching background is going to be great. Like, it kind of baffles me that you even have that question, because you should be fine, like, honestly. But any parallels that you can make, if you're working in, like, business, right, you know time management. If you're working in like, basically doing anything with multitasking or anything with a team, you're able to say, I know how to work with these types of personalities, and this is how I had a bad experience in the past, and this is how I made that experience into a good experience, right? Like, anything that you do has cross application to your new job. You just have to think about, what am I going to be doing in, like, my day-to-day at this job, and how did that parallel with what I did previously or what I currently do today? Because you'll be able to figure out that.
Build one thing too, like, build something really good. I love, like, the color picker example as a component, as a front end to show work on is kind of cool. So you can loop through the array, generate the color by radial. You can go as a grid. There's all different things you can do, but come up with some piece of code that, or like UI that you could demonstrate that would show all the knowledge that you have. At least put something into practice there.
I think we've got time for about one or two more questions.
Is contract work common for first-time people in the tech field, or someone who has just one job in the tech field?
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. So I think, not to scare anybody, but this will be the hardest, if this is your first job and you're graduating from boot camp, this will be the hardest job that you've ever gotten. So know that if it's looking hard, and know that everyone after here will be much easier. You're going to make more money too. But I do see a contract route fairly frequently, right? So if you're able to maybe have a friend, a family friend, and it's not necessarily a tech company, but they need some dev work. Whatever you can do to show that you're not just a boot camp grad, you are a professional developer with professional experience, that's going to help you. Is it going to get you to the next level as quickly as, joining a Frontier or joining, a great tech company? No, it's not. But it's going to help you on that path to getting in that door. So don't eschew contract work at this stage in your career. It's definitely a path that I've seen personally be successful.
So my whole focus from November until December 15th or whatever when I started at Turing is like, or started at Frontier, it's like get a job, get a job. Now I'm finally like, now what? Like what trajectories should I be like looking into, because I don't know that I want to do C# and Azure forever. Like how can I start planning out future steps for my career, and like what options do you think are open to somebody who's just starting as a junior?
So I've got one thing to add too, which I think is pretty important. If you're lucky enough to maybe be debating between two positions at an early stage in your career, and the comp is, maybe you're getting slightly more money at one or the other. At this stage in your career, that's, from my experience, not the most important thing. What's the most important thing is, are you working with technologies that, are the latest and greatest? Are these going to be the technology of the future? Technologies that people are hiring for? Are you working in a silo, right? So at this stage in your career, you better not be the smartest guy in the room or gal in the room. That's bad. But I see that sometimes, and sometimes that's all you have available to you. In that case, take it. But don't chase the dollar signs right now. Chase the experience. Chase the mentorship right now. That's probably more important. It is more important.
Brianna, you kind of asked the question of how do I transition out of where I am currently into something else, right?
Just like what is available to me next?
She said, yeah, so she said anything is available. So that's kind of the truth. Like you're whether you're in a job for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 11 years, as long as like you're willing and able and can kind of find something that you actually like to do, you're gonna probably have more passion for that area than most of the people that are applying. I hired Mr. Nick Tietz back there whenever I was at Frontier Airlines because I saw him at a meetup, and well, kind of a meetup. It was actually GoCo Colorado, but I saw him there. He was talking to my girlfriend, and he didn't know that I was a hiring manager. He wasn't talking to her in that way, people. Come on. He didn't know I was a hiring manager, and he was just talking to her tech-wise, and he was like, yeah, I'm trying to get my first job, and like people are telling me like, no, stay focused. And he's like, but have you heard of like GraphQL? Have you heard of Python? He's like, I can't just stay focused right now. And so to me, it wasn't like what he said or what languages that he was talking about. To me, it was like, oh, okay. Like, I know I can throw whatever it is at this guy, and he's just going to be, like, great. So I will hire someone that has passion, and it doesn't even have to be like, oh, I am so absolutely in love with this. You just have to show that you're enthused about whatever it is, right? Like, and that's enough for me to know that you're probably going to outpace any person that I bring in with experience. So it is kind of limitless. Just find something that you like. Yeah, get psyched.
Keep writing Medium articles like you mentioned, like stay on that path. If you're passionate about security, or there's one part of it that you really like, start becoming an expert in that throughout your career. Yeah.
All right, one last question. Let's do it.
Kind of a flip side of how do I capitalize on a career that I used to have. Going directly from undergrad to boot camp and having no, professional career, how do I, oftentimes the feedback I'll get, whether it be an HR screen or a final round interview that I don't get, it's like, oh, you didn't have professional experience, even if it was outside of the field. How do I navigate the conversation away from my lack of professional experience and to like what I can offer the company itself?
I'm just curious, like, what did you study and why did you pick that?
Why did I
in undergrad? What did you study in undergrad and why?
Information systems and accounting. Why did I pick that? My mom was an accountant.
Good.
And then I realized I didn't so much love it.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed my IS degree. So like I try to capitalize on my IS degree because it is more of a technical background, and it is kind of the reason why I wanted to become more technical focus is because I was very interested in IS. But again, it's not professional experience.
But that shows me that like you are thinking about like the trajectory of your life and that you're curious and like you are reaching for more. So like, yeah, I'm not a hiring manager, but I like, that sounds interesting to me. Like, tell me why you're passionate about what you chose to do so far.
Yeah, again, it kind of goes back to the passion thing. And what I would say is, if someone does bring that up to you, it's kind of a catch-22, right? Like, you can't tell them that you have professional experience because they're not giving you professional experience. So for me, though, I would just say, like, I may not have professional experience now, but, like, this is what I want to do, and I am going to continue pushing until, like, I'm able to get my first job. And maybe I'll see you in 6 months to a year if you don't choose me today. But, like, I don't have it now, I will have it. And just kind of that determination of, you're asking me this question that is honestly, like, kind of a shitty question. Why would you be asking me about professional experience? You clearly are hiring a junior developer and you've seen my resume. So for me, I would just go with like direction on that question.
I like that. And I would say ask them what you can bring them back in 4 months or 6 months that would prove it to them. And similarly, like I have my undergrad's in psychology, and then I did like a 1 year, it wasn't code camp, but it was like a 1 year college thing that got me a little bit of computer programming. But I just self-taught myself through that whole time and just built up. At the time it was Flash ActionScript. I'm kind of dating myself, but I had like a huge animation portfolio and things I worked on during that time. So just put your head down and like get some examples together that really show them.
Yeah, and I would just add, like, along the lines of passion, like, what's your story? Why are you here? Why are you doing this career pivot? Like, you can try to connect the dots, like, you know, but at some point, people are going to realize you're doing that, right? Like, just tell your personal story, right? Why did you stop this career and go into coding boot camp? What got you passionate about that? Because people want to understand that, understand you. And I think they're more likely to hire, you know, okay, I get this guy, right? Or I get this girl, right? Like, this is what they're all about. This is why they're here, and I want to make them a part of my company.
All right, cool. I'm an MIS major, by the way. IS and MIS. I think that's gonna about wrap things up. I think thanks are in order. Thanks to our panelists, Brianna, Jonah, Kristin, Brett. And thank you guys for all coming out and asking better questions than me. And then, of course, thanks Frontier Airlines. They provided the pizza, our sponsor tonight. And, of course, Code Talent and the free beer and this amazing venue. And then one last item I forgot to mention at the beginning, because we're the Jamstack Denver meetup, there's some big news today that Netlify got their Series C funding of $56 million. So, snaps for Netlify. Oh, and we're going to pass around a notebook if you want to put your information down. If you're looking for a job, if you have a job available at your company and you're hiring, just put your information in there. If you have feedback about the meetup, and if you want a cool sticker, we got stickers. I think that's it. I think we're out of pizza. Maybe there's salad. Thanks for coming. We'll stick around here till 8. There's beer.